Ian, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast. I'm very excited for today's chat because we always had good chin wags when I was living over in Burlington. So, Ian, do you want to introduce yourself to the pod? People always hate this type of stuff, but I'm going to get you to do it anyway.
Yeah.
I
No,
like
totally.
one reason I actually want to get Ian on first of all is because, like, Ian, you're only what, like 26, 25, 26?
27.
27, okay.
27.
Well, you've been like competing for like, geez, a decade at this point, right? Involved in powerlifting for a very long time, which is longer than a lot of people really stay in the sport. Like nowadays, like a lot of people will do like a meet or two and then they'll hang their hat, or they'll hit a plateau and they'll just like head out. But I know that you've had some pretty like unreal success. I seen not too long ago there was like somebody had an Instagram post up there where they were saying like looking at progression rates among Canadian lifters, and you had like one of the highest progression rates, which I thought was fucking nuts. From where you started. So, Ian, how did you get involved in powerlifting?
Yeah, so essentially, like, I grew up playing a lot of soccer, a lot of volleyball, like traditional sports when I was younger. And then once I kind of decided to hang up my hats with like soccer and volleyball because I knew I wasn't going to go pro or anything, essentially I ended up starting to go to the gym. And, I did like everyone else, upper body only, didn't train legs, just kind of focused on just, running a bodybuilding split, some free programs. And then when I started university, I think I watched a video of Johnny Candido. I'm sure everyone and their mother knows who Johnny was, but he was very influential. So he kind of got me started into finding purpose in the gym, because I felt like when I was doing bodybuilding, upper body only splits, I just didn't have a goal, and I'm a very goal driven individual. So started powerlifting at 18, just ran a bunch of free programs for the first, I would say, year and a half, give or take. And then I did my first powerlifting meet August of 2015, where, like you said, the progression rate was pretty crazy. Like I started with, a 450 total kilos. So in pounds, that's around 900. So under 1,000 pounds. And I think my body weight at the time was like 178, or in kilos, it was about 80 kilos, something like that. So very, very small versus where I'm at now. Like right now, I'm at like 101 kilos. So that's just a perfect concept that, if you do this for a long enough period of time, slowly progress. But essentially, I did my first meet. I kind of got the bug for it because I thrive off competition. That's just how I grew up playing sports. And I was just like, okay, like when's the next meet? It's like, okay, nationals or provincials was in a few months. Did that meet, did nationals, and then I was pretty much part of the circuit. Because once in powerlifting, you do a few meets and you're part of the circuit where every year you have to do nationals, provincials, a local meet. I was just hooked on it because I was good. I was getting feedback, and not in terms that I was good at powerlifting, but my progression was really good. And every meet I was adding, 30 kilos to my total, 40 kilos to my total, and that's pretty cool feedback because you're like, if I do this, if I do X, I get Y, and then essentially fast forward, just been doing it every year, 3 meets a year until probably COVID. And then where the coaching kind of started was as an athlete is I was part of a club at university. We had like a powerlifting club, which was kind of cool. So I ended up joining that and then becoming a vice president. From there, I was in a KIN program, kinesiology or exercise science program. So I kind of wanted to apply the stuff I was learning in exercise science and apply it to coaching. So I literally would coach new people that went to the club for free, and just wanted to apply my skills. A few of those athletes I started coaching for free, and maybe I started charging $50, or in pounds, it'd be like 30 pounds a month or something. And a few of them ended up making it to nationals, and I actually had one of my athletes was a 2-time like national champion within 4 or 5 years. So that gave me good feedback that like maybe I kind of know what I'm doing. And then from there, I just kept coaching as a hobby. So I started coaching 2018, I think, was like the first year I started taking on clients. So I didn't do it after my first meet because I actually like waited a few years to learn and progress. I didn't do my first meet and just decided to like, all right, let's just coach now. It's like, no, I definitely did not coach. And I didn't post on social media about coaching probably until 2022, to be honest, or even 2021, because I felt like I didn't have the knowledge to post like that. So it's crazy to see some of these individuals that we know that within the first meet they start posting. I'm like, I can never have done that. I waited till I was 7 years deep in the sport to do that. So anyway, I started coaching for free. Didn't think coaching was a viable option for me. It wasn't really the goal. I think that's something that people ask a lot. It's like, was that the goal? It's like, it was never the goal for me. I just did it because I really liked it. And then I went through grad school after bachelor's, was like, okay, I'm going to, do this, get a PhD, become a professor, because I just love learning. Like, I like applying knowledge, learning, and just learning about physiology, nutrition, like just kind of like learning about the human body. Once I got into grad school, kind of realized was not for me, was not my favorite thing. I love teaching, but I didn't really like the writing aspects of it, and some of the research just didn't interest me that much. And at the time, I was kind of coaching 10 to 15 athletes while doing grad school, and I was like, this coaching part's way more fun than the research part. So then what happened is I finished the grad program. I was like, I'm going to finish it. Started really getting aggressive with the marketing and coaching. And by the time I finished grad school, I had enough people on my roster that I was able to do it full time. And ever since then, I've pretty much been a full-time coach all the way through. And relating to that, when you said that biggest total progression for the audience that wants to know, like I started with a 450 total. I got to 800 in I want to say, even though I took a break during COVID, it took about 7 years. So go from 450 to 800. My dots, for context, so because a lot of people might think, oh, he just got fat and increased his total. My dots went from 310 to 490 in
Nice.
7 years. So good progression, not at 500 yet, but we're getting there. But again, the first 4 or 5 years are very linear. I think I went from a 310 dots to 470 in 4 years. It was crazy. And then plateau started happening, injuries started happening. So that's the long story of how I've gone into it. Obviously, it's a longer story because it's been 10 years, which is crazy to think about. But that's kind of how I got started as an athlete, and then as a coach going into that.
I know right now as well, you've been kind of dealing with some setbacks in training, right? You've been dealing with it's the hip, isn't it? That's been at you.
Hip and shoulder. I would say the hip's been an ongoing thing. I'd say my first real injury was right before COVID. I had an adductor injury, worked way too hard, pushed my volume way too much, was being stupid. Hurt my adductor, and then that took 8 months to a year to heal up. But because it was during COVID, it was actually really easy because I was like, okay, no one's competing. So I could just rehab on my own timeline. There's no pressure, there's no meets, right? So I kind of started running, doing little other stuff that most people were doing, and then I rehabbed that, and then I was pretty good until I got a hip injury, and that's been lingering for about 2 years off and on. Sometimes I get periods where it doesn't hurt, sometimes I get periods when it does hurt. And then the shoulder's been, everyone probably has shoulder problems, but I've had that for about 3 or 4 years, just off and on. I could PR, a little setback, PR, a little setback. But as of recent, my hip actually feels really good, which is awesome. I'm training for nationals, which is in 6 weeks. Shoulder's not doing the best, but the lower body lifts, the StrengthCast climbing, I can actually just go to the gym and not spend 45 minutes warming up to squat, which is amazing. It just feels good to go in and do 10 minutes of warm-ups and get under the bar and just lift and just focus on pushing, because as you know, when you're hurt, you can't really push because your body's inhibiting itself. It's kind of I can't do it. I don't want to push. It's guarding. So I was guarding a lot of times in my squats and my lifts, and those injuries really taught me a lot about how to, one, zoom out on the bigger picture, because it could be very depressing, when you get injured and stuff. But it just gave me some kind of ideas to think, okay, who am I outside of the sport? Because again, I've been in it for 10 years. So my identity is this sport. I coach, I lift. My entire 24 hours of my day, I would say maybe 18 hours of my day involves power, maybe not 18. Let's go 12 to 14. I sleep 8 hours, and then maybe 2-3 hours of non-powerlifting time. Consider that, right? So that's a huge factor in myself. And just learning how to reframe injury to be a positive thing. I think that's the easiest way to get through things. So yeah, I've been dealing with that for a while, but again, you just got to do what you can to get through it. But things are definitely trending in the right direction, so can't be too mad about that.
Yeah, it's a hard switch from, when you've had that rate of progression with the likes of your total going from 450 to 800 to all of a sudden have the brakes applied to, try to overcome an injury, and you're not getting that quick reward anymore. And of course, with injuries, I think one of the biggest thoughts that goes through everybody's mind is will I ever get back to where I was? And you can feel as if the climb to get back to where you were just feels insurmountable. But obviously the fact that you've continued just as you said, do what you can. Kind of speaks to probably a lot of the lessons you've learned across like the last like 10 years of powerlifting. And like one of the questions I wanted to ask you is because you've been involved in it for so long, and I guess like the evolution of powerlifting in Ireland, it's really exploded like in the last maybe three years or so. But like over Canada side, state side, powerlifting has been like, it's been like done since like the 70s, you know. But with how much has grown, it's particularly the last 10 years since you started, what are some of the kind of biggest trends that you've seen come and go, and what would be some things that have kind of stayed like the test of time?
I would say like in terms of like trends, I mean you could probably break that down in different ways, but like I've seen like, so when I started in 2015, I would say from 2015 to 2019, that to me like felt like peak powerlifting, because like the growth was actually very like not exponential. It's not to the point where it is now, but the participation was actually really, really high at that point. And I think 2019 we hit a pretty good peak because we're going to do our first Sheffield, right? That next year. Yeah. And then, you know, the world shut down. And what happened was, and I'd say about, I'm going to make a random percentage. I'd say about 10% of the entire powerlifting population made it past COVID. Like, the people I competed in 2015, there's maybe a handful of lifters that I still remember that do it to this day. And that just proves that like the sport is in its infancy in terms of like people coming in and out of the sport and leaving, and it's one of those things where it's like a lot of people join the sport because like it's fun to increase your maxes, it's very fun to see progression, but when that progression, like you said, halts to a break, people kind of realize like, why am I doing this? And then a lot of individuals are like, maybe I'm not doing it for the right reasons. And then they usually leave, right? Like it's very common. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a trend, but in terms of like the growth of powerlifting, like it had a huge exponential growth from 2015 to 2019. And then now in 2022, it's kind of picked back up. In the last 3 years, there's been a huge boom. But that huge boom has not been the existing lifters that were there before. It's just been a new crop of lifters that are coming in. The talent pool is getting greater. If we view the trends from a programming perspective, like I can summarize it pretty easily. When I first started, it was a DUP, daily undulating periodization. That was the cool thing in town. Like, you know, making sure you could train multiple qualities at the same time. Yeah, just like everyone's running their 8s, their 3s, and their top set on their primary day at the end of the week. That wasn't, I mean, primary day, secondary day, that wasn't even included at that point. It was just like we could train hypertrophy, strength, peaking, and we could run those blocks in sequentially. And that was kind of the start. Obviously, I think conjugate kind of like fell off when I started. It obviously still exists to this day, and I think it's actually funny when people say that like conjugate isn't useful, when in the reality of the programs that we write, it has an element of conjugate in it. It's just interesting. But that just proves that like you can't be dogmatic. Yeah, you can't be dogmatic with your coaching. Like it has to be, you have to accept a lot of different things and be willing to grow. And I think that's one of the biggest things with the evolution of powerlifting is if you're a coach and you're not growing with the times, you're not adapting to the situation in terms of like the new information, and you're just dogmatic, you could be killing your business, killing everything in terms of like your growth as a coach. And it just shows that it's like, are you a lifelong learner, or are you someone who's just complacent, right? So that's a programming trend I see. So the DUP trend, and then we went up to RTS has always been adding in like little bits, pieces of new stuff that kind of challenges the status quo. So they were obviously developing their bottom-up programming style, which is definitely very cool, and I really like it a lot. I've applied a lot to my coaching. And then RP, another one. When I started, RP was kind of a thing, but like people were very much running percentage-based programs, and then over time, you know, we got into doing more RP, more auto-regulated programs. The rise of the Instagram lifter has been a thing since 2015, you know, like 2015 Instagram was still like a big thing, but it wasn't really the same. Like King of the Lifts didn't exist in 2015. It only existed, I think, in 2016, 2017, so just shortly after. So that was obviously a huge catalyst for growth. And I think the influencers were a huge thing. Like the Russell Orhis of the world, I don't really know other influencers. There's tons of other ones, but like they grew the exposure of powerlifting, and I think that's creating this mass like it's cool to powerlift. Whereas before it was such a niche sport, still is niche, but within our community it feels like it's not niche anymore. But like it used to be like hardcore metal music, slapping each other, like that was how it was. Whereas now it's like anime kids and like other interesting folks coming in the sport, and like it's just been a weird evolution that I've noticed. But yeah, it's been cool to see it. Like it's been cool to see mainstream, cool to see like money come in the sport. But that's some of the trends I've noticed. I don't know if that answers kind of like your question and what you were looking for, but
yeah. Well, like that's some of the stuff that I kind of wanted to get at, because from the programming side, for sure. Like I remember like reading all about like daily undulating periodization, like when Mike Sordas and everything was talking about it, and I remember just like talking to some people and they'd be just like, I'm running a DUP program. Yeah, and it's like, what do you mean by a DUP program? It's just a case of just having different rep ranges throughout the week. It's a description, I guess, of like the way your kind of split is kind of laid out versus like it being a specific program. It's just the arrangement of the training variables, and yeah, with the likes of the like RTS, of course, I bring out like the likes of emergent strategies, and I think the emergent strategies framework was definitely one that kind of stood out to me a lot because of how the traditional like periodization like models or programming styles did kind of work in regards to like going through like traditional block periodization, where they just do like block of 12s, block of 8s, block of 4s, and like a lot of kind of lifts would pretty much repeat like the same like intensity or like volume, whereas like the emergent strategies made a lot of sense to me in the sense it was like, we're going to find a microcycle of training that works for you, and we're going to repeat that. And we're going to find one that's going to allow you to peak the best in coming to the competition, and we're going to use that. And we'll tweak it over time is like, of course, I think one thing that I think having microcycle blocks of training that work really well for you and help you to get like a pretty consistent and reliable result. As you progress as a lifter, you get stronger. You're gonna have some areas get stronger at a faster rate, and you're gonna have ones get stronger at a slower rate. And then all of a sudden, you're gonna have something that was maybe previously strong points is gonna become something that you have to work a little bit harder on. Or in your case, maybe somewhere gets injured, and now you have to kind of change around like the kind of the array of your cycle, right? Understanding that it's not always going to be the thing that works for you is not always going to work all the time, like forever in the future, especially as you go through like the beginner powerlifter and how much volume that they can tolerate, the frequency they can tolerate relative to, if they go from being maybe an under 83 to like a 120, their tolerance to volume and intensity is going to be different. And then as well, like factor in things like life changes, people who are college students relative to when they go into the big bad world and maybe they have now a manual labor job or a job that involves night shifts, their training schedule is going to be completely different. I think with all the trends that have come and gone in powerlifting, I think as you kind of mentioned there, like with being a lifelong learner and just trying to kind of soak up everything that's out there, you're just trying to see it as like tools that you can use at different points, not trying to like be like, this is good, this is bad, this is done by certain lifters, like, this is done by like fucking gear heads, this is done by broccoli heads, it's just something that you can use at a certain point, I think a lot of the kind of bad things that come from powerlifting is when people get themselves into tribal groups, and that kind of like, if you're not able to look at things objectively, it can make you make decisions because you don't want to look like you are associated to that group, which is, if you're coaching somebody or if you're even work for trying to train yourself, that's not having the clients or the athletes progress at heart. It's keeping your own kind of like biases or like whatever like safe from being like kind of challenged or like kind of shown to the outside world of what you think or what you are afraid to portray or whatever.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the other aspect that like I talked about this, I presented at like a mentorship the other day, which was kind of cool actually. That I was able to like kind of teach other new coaches how to coach, and I was talking about long-term development, which kind of relates to like the longevity of my career and how long I've been doing it for. But essentially, like I was kind of majority of my presentation was kind of talking about like coaching the personality of the lifter and understanding the importance of like adherence. So when we bring these all optimal strategies, whether it's like bottom-up programming, it's top-down strategies, periodization. If we want to keep a lifter engaged in the process, we have to kind of ask them like, what are they looking for, right? So for example, you can come up with a perfect microcycle structure for a lifter, but if you have to program the same microcycle week in, week out, they might be like, man, I'm kind of bored. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And it's like, okay, like that's a problem. And you can easily just be like, well, if you're bored, like you could just leave coaching. That's fine. You could do that. But like, if I'm being honest, I don't think all coaches, I think people view it like retention is much more important than acquisition, and simply understanding like what are your clients' goals and like what do they want out of the lifting, and their goals change over time as well, right? I think it's the biggest naive thing I learned as a coach, and I think you'll relate to this, is I assumed everyone had the same level of dedication that I did to my craft in coaching, or as an athlete. Sorry, in terms of like I don't think I ever miss days. Like I might occasionally miss a day being sick, or maybe if I'm on vacation, I have to shift a day or two. But the more I coach, the more I realize, damn, people don't even follow the structure of the microcycle consistently because life just happens.
Yeah,
like we organize our lives. Like we're as coaches, we organize our lives based on our training. Obviously, we have certain obligations, but for the most part, like you can train in the middle of the day. Not many people can do that, right? So there's that aspect of it, and I think the human element of coaching is something that I think is just lost, and I think that's something in social media where it's like, if you look at powerlifting now, you look at RTS bottom strategies, they're great strategies provided your lifter is consistent. And we know that consistency lifter to lifter, I know with my own roster, I'd say maybe 60% of my roster is like on the dot. Whereas the rest of them, it's not a bad thing. They just have other priorities, or they have other things going on. So I need to cater that program to like what's going to make the most enjoyable period for them, but at the same time give them the progress they want, but ultimately like feed into their personality. I coach some people that they'll do the same program every week in, week out, and they have zero issues with it. But then I have other athletes who are like, these accessories are kind of getting old. Can I try something different? And it's like, okay, yeah, it's like not a big deal. Like we don't need to be that scientific. I think thinking that our clients are like scientific experiments, it's cool in nature, but then you also have to realize there's a human element to that. Like they're not just lab rats. Like
yeah,
they have their goals.
For people who don't have like the super grand or super intense goals, like I do think trying to like bring excitement and enjoyment to the training is probably like almost more important than like the rest of the details, and even if like the person does say from time to time that they appreciate the details, quite often when you see that they're just not being consistent with the training, it comes back to, well, are you enjoying this stuff here? Like, like if you're not being consistent within your training, there probably is something there to do with either the enjoyment of the program or like your general excitement to do it. Because I don't know, like even when I take back to like when I was young and getting started in the gym, I wasn't going towards the exercises that I didn't want to do, right? I wasn't squatting. I wasn't doing stuff like that because I didn't like it at the time and I wasn't good at it. So naturally enough, like I wasn't like dragging myself into the gym to do a leg day. Much to I could be a better squatter if I did back then. But like now, like myself, yourself, we have competitive goals. We're competing in powerlifting. We want to do the best as we can. We want to drive our totals up. And as I said, like you get to a point where you are trying to compete at a decently high level or as high level as you can, and certain things are just like givens. Like you're showing up to the gym and getting that session done, that's a given. Like competing on your volume, that's a given. Not skipping back down sets just because you feel a little bit tired or because like you just don't really want to do them today. Like, that's not something that happens. That's absolute bare minimum of somebody who is really like looking to compete at the highest level they can, because a lot of people do get into powerlifting like after like a couple of meets they will kind of start setting them those goals. They'll be like, I want to be competitive now. What does it take for me to be competitive? And while some of the details absolutely do matter, you know, at that like kind of higher end level, the consistency comes first. You know, as you said there, like just something as simple as keeping your days relatively consistent. You know, if your heavy squat day is getting too close to heavy deadlift day, and you find the heavy deadlift day gets affected by your heavy squat day, and you usually have a rest day in between, or like, you know, they're further spaced apart. You know, it's programmed like that for a reason. Like, you know, I think that's something when I'm programming for clients, I do have to like kind of remind them that like, I of course want to know what days that you can train the best, right? I want that to fit your schedule. But then once you say it's like fucking Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, after you told me that, well then now I'm gonna start to program the exercises in a specific fashion. If you're gonna move them, please tell me. You know?
Yeah, no, I have some athletes that like even this week they're like, oh, like I got sick, but like I'm gonna cram these sessions in. I just want to do the accessories, and I'm like, guys, just do the program when you can get it done. If you finish your week 2 on a Wednesday, yes, it's not consistent, but if you're consistent from there on out, it's fine. We can work with it. But like they try to cram it in that 7-day micro. It's like, okay, I'll just train 6 days in a row. I'll catch up. And I was like, oh my God, don't do that. Like, despite me like trying to like say that over and over, like don't combine your sessions. It matters. Don't skip your accessories to make up for more comp lifts. It's like, just get it done when you get it done. If you're on a comp prep, I think it's a little different, but especially if you're like 20 weeks out of a meet, it's like, just change the microcycle based on like when you finish your week, and then like we'll just make adjustments, and we're just trying to vie for that consistency, right? But it is just funny that some athletes are like, well, like the main lifts only matter, so like I'll just skip all the accessories. It's like no, like we can't be doing that. Like,
yeah,
it's not the way to go.
The accessories are programmed there for a reason. Like that's one thing I always I'll tell like, you know, my clients is like, your accessories are programmed in there because they matter. If they didn't matter, I would not program them. You know,
exactly.
And even if you do extra accessories, just let me know as well, because that's good. Because like if you're doing other accessories that are not in the program, and you're progressing on your lifts, well, maybe it's just a case I didn't program enough work in for you. You know, like, but I as a coach, I like to know. You know, these are type of things that like maybe just get can be oversight by the person, or maybe they don't want to upset, you know, us as the coach. But you know, ultimately, I guess like when like myself and yourself working with people, it is a very like collaborative process. I guess like, again, you know, just talking there about like, you know, the kind of bare bones of getting somebody's training schedule like in order so that they can complete program best. But also just like tapping into their history. You know, like what's worked well for you, what exercises do you like, what exercises do you not like. You know, what type of, like if you're talking to somebody who's a little bit more kind of like into it, like, you know, what type of intensities have you found to work quite well on like your bench or your squat or your deadlift, and all these kind of different questions. Is there any, like, how do you kind of go about the process of kind of onboarding like a new client from that point of view when it comes to that collaborative process, and, you know, through when you do take them on, like how does that evolve for you?
Yeah. So usually like I always have like a call essentially to just get to know them and kind of get them to fill out a form, and I use that form to kind of guide the conversation, because I think some coaches will do a form and then they'll just like, all right, let's start coaching. I'm like, no. Like, we need to have a conversation online to see, one, what's your personality like, kind of like get a little deeper with those questions on like their whys and why they want to do things. And then we're going over like training history. It's like some athletes come to me like pretty new without a coach, so their training history is kind of like limited in a sense. But then what I'll do is I'll kind of try to cater that training history on like, what do you think works best for you? Or like, what do you think may lead to progression? And asking the same questions like, why do you like this exercise versus the other exercise for like accessories? And like, why do you not like them? If someone says, oh, I don't like Bulgarians because like they just hurt, well, it's like, no, like we're going to continue doing them because they're good for you. But if you think like they're not going to progress your total, then yeah, like that might be something that like maybe that's not going to be the movement for you. And then in terms of like, it's just simply meeting your client where they're at. So on the call, I get an idea of like, are they a coach themselves? Are they not a coach? If they're not a coach, how many years have they been doing this? Like, how much do they know from a knowledge perspective? And then my goal as a coach, and not every coach does this, is like, I want to bring up their training IQ. Like, I want to educate them over the course of the process, because one, there's two things, twofold. One, they become more independent, which is great. They can become more collaborative over time. So obviously the collaboration in the beginning with a new athlete might not be the best because they might not know much at all. But then over the course of a program, I send them resources. Like, I posted a lot of resources for my clients. It's more of a scalable option for me to educate, but then I'll also educate them when I'm writing their blogs, kind of explain the ins and the outs of it. And even if some athletes may not care that much, it's just nice to know the intent of like what we're trying to do so you can accomplish it to the best of your abilities. But as you work with a client long term, their training IQ develops, it gets higher. And then when I ask them questions like, hey, like, how do you feel about the structure of your primary to secondary days? Are you coming into your primary day feeling fresh, but like the weights aren't moving? It's like, okay, amazing. This is the options that we can do. We can either add more secondary volume. We can add more leg accessories to promote a little bit more fatigue. So that way when you get to that primary day, maybe your fitness is up and it's not too down in terms of that, or we can adjust the frequency. But without asking them that, without them knowing, it's hard for us to actually get that collaboration. Because if I, like, a lot of times with a new athlete, like, how's training? Like, oh, it's feeling okay. It's feeling good. I'm like, why is it feeling good? And I'll just continue to try to ask more questions. I think that's something as a coach I didn't do before. Before I would just assume, okay, everything's great, everything's good. Now I ask probably more questions than I should be asking, because I want to know, like, how are you really feeling about it? Like, don't just like go through the program and be like, yeah, it's okay. It's like, okay, that's not a good enough answer for me. Like, why? Like, what is going on? There's something in your life that's going on. Is it something that within the programming that you think is okay but could be better? Just trying to create that dialogue is key, and creating open communication is going to be key for that. So from that onboarding to progressing, it just depends on the athlete and where they're at. Like, the end goal is to make my athletes as smart as possible, because like I said, they're independent. If they do quit coaching at some point, at least they're better off on their own. Maybe they could program for themselves, because it is an investment on themselves. So it's my job as a coach to create that investment. Because if we just foster dependency, they leave, now they don't know what they're doing. It's like, that doesn't really look good as a coach. And despite what people may think, the more you make your athlete more independent, yeah, they might leave because they're independent, but the more they'll probably appreciate you because you didn't try to just string them along like for freaking 4 or 5 plus years. And most of the time, if someone wants to work with you for 4 to 5 years, they probably just like you as a coach and really appreciate your guidance. So if you foster that, that's a huge key. The second one is from a referral base. The more you educate your clients, the more like, yo, I worked coaching for 8 months and like I learned so much. Like, if you want to learn and fast track your learning, like, go to him. You don't have to be there for like 3 or 4 years. If you want to, you can, but you can stay with him for 8 months and you'll like learn a ton, and then you can like move on. And then that just filters out the system of like, you're just promoting a good product, but you're also just growing and developing individuals. And like, that's our job. Like, we are teachers at the end of the day. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah, I love that process. It's pretty similar to mine. I think like the age of just sending out the PDF and just saying check in with me next week and then I'll give you your numbers for the next week. That's they are well and truly past us. And if that's your approach as a coach, you are definitely not going to last too long. It's like it's imperative that as a coach you do invest in your education to kind of learn about the ins and outs of programming, so that you can explain the intent of the program and be confident in your decisions, because that's ultimately what we are kind of paid for. It's like we're paid for making decisions for people that they don't have the skills to do. If you struggle to make decisions because you don't know the knowledge, it's very difficult to be confident that you're going to be getting the result for the person, and that person's probably not going to stay around too long either. I think, as you mentioned there, creating some independency with clients is so important. I say to a lot of my clients, my goal is to put me out of a job one day, to have you fire me at some point. Obviously people will stick around because, as you said, they enjoy working with you, they enjoy support, and over time when you work with people for so long, you feel like you've got such a connection to them, you feel like you become friends. I know some people say you shouldn't be friends with your clients, and I disagree. If you some of our clients tell us stuff that they probably don't tell anybody else, you know, and that kind of signals like there's a lot of trust there, you know, and to look at them as anything else other than like, you know, yeah, I could go out for a beer with this person or for a coffee, or I could lift with this person. Like, you know, I think that it's such a strange kind of thought process to have. Some coaches have it like that, but what was I going to say? Had something else to add there.
To build off that really quick, I think I agree with both sides. I think like you shouldn't necessarily have that friendship impede on the way you coach someone, because I also see a lot of coaches that will like be best friends with their clients, and then when they message them, they'll like completely disregard the feedback and like, hey, like, so like, what are you doing later or whatever, or like treating them as a true friend. They don't actually give them the service that they need. So I think like there's a balance. You don't want to be robotic and not be a human, but it's also setting the boundaries. So like, for example, like my clients, like on Instagram or whatever, it's like if you message me on Instagram, that's more of like a friendly thing. Like if you want to send, like if you send a meme, and we're just like, this is a friend to friend interaction. But when it comes to like Slack, where I run like my coaching, that is the coaching. Like I'm going to coach you. My coaching hat is going to be on. Like there might be some banter here and there, like, but the goal is coaching and feedback. And then obviously on the other social platforms, it can be a bit more of like a social thing. So it's like, I think it's just creating the boundaries and making sure that like you're actually coaching the individual, because you'd be surprised like how much like gaslighting happens. Like I've had clients that came to me and they're like, yeah, well, like they said like we were family, but then they weren't making results, they weren't progressing, and like nothing was getting better. But because they put them in this family category, like they'd stayed with them because like they just didn't want to leave that coach because they felt like family. And I'm like, I think you got gaslit there. And he goes, damn. And I was like, yeah. I was like, you kind of did. I was like, I'm more than cool being friends with my clients. It's just like be able to set the boundary of like coach the individual. Like don't just stop coaching them because you're friends now. Like, you know? So I think there's a balance. Like that's how I view it.
Yeah. Well, like at the end of the day, the job is still to be objective. You still have to. You're still getting paid to help them progress towards your goals. It's not rent a friend.
No, you're not renting. You're not paying for a friend. I mean, if you are, like, good for you. But that's not what I do. If we become friends by byproduct, that's great. But
at least maybe like hire like some like hot Russian escort or something like that versus us.
That's crazy. Yeah, no, you could.
There's something else I was going to mention on the collaboration side of things. It's after fucking going out of my head here, but I guess like this is also something that like we were talking before we like press record here, and I also wanted to ask you because like you have a decent social media following. It's not massive, right? But you have a really good client base, like, you know, like you've got a really strong business, and I think a lot of people, especially nowadays as a coach, they probably over index on the likes of social media and like the importance of that without actually like taking into consideration that like that's like a small part of being a coach. Like, you know, that's like your marketing department. That was one part of your marketing department. It's your fucking internet marketing department, but it's still just one tiny part. So like, Can you give us a bit of an idea as to like, you know, how coaching has evolved for you to like be at the point of where like you know, like, you know, you have other coaches that work for you, you know, because you are, like, you know, so successful.
No. I mean, the thing with the social media is like how I approach business. And again, I by no means an expert and still figuring it out to this day. But I think the biggest thing that like new powerlifting coaches, like, where do you know the online market's very saturated? Like we know this. So I think the goal of social media from my perspective is to stay relevant in social media. So posting valuable content that will just help individuals and not really forcing it either. Because I think some coaches are like, oh, well, if I start coaching, I need to post like 7 days a week for the algorithm, or I got to post so frequently. By no means I'm saying don't do that, but I definitely got in the trap of like, if I post more on social media, I'll grow my client base, whatever, I'll grow my following, and that definitely can play a role. But I think one of the biggest aspects that people will hire you for coaching more or less is the involvement in the community in person. Like being able to take a local community. So like if you live in a community where there is a need for a good powerlifting coach that's local, focus on that. Like, build your community. Go spot and load. Go handle for free at meets. Like, literally, if you have no clients, go to a meet, straight up volunteer, and be like, if anybody needs like a handler, like, I'm here. And like, people may not like that because you're not getting paid. You're not, getting any monetary incentive from it. You're probably just like losing money and losing time. But the reality of the situation is no one knows who you are. So you kind of need to develop that local base and develop local respect within the community. And more importantly, the other part of business that I think I even failed at this, to be honest, is like scaling. Slow growth is good growth. I think a lot of individuals will get like, let's say they're at 10 clients, they're like, okay, I got to get to like 40. And it's like, brother, like, let's get to 20 first. And let's look at your systems and see like, where's the hole in the system? And then slow growth from there. You should be building your coaching plan based on like a 5-year to 10-year trajectory, not this, a year I want to be full-time. And I was very fortunate that like when I did put on social media and like, I mean, obviously I had years of growth, like the growth was fairly fast in a sense to get like to more of a full client roster. However, that growth, you need to scale to your systems. So if you don't have good systems in place, it could fall apart really easily. And here's the other aspect of it. The moment you have a few poor clients that felt like your service was poor, that exponentially gets told to everyone. So like your job as a coach is like just stay focused on the service, focus on your referrals, and especially with the small social media following. My social media is just a bonus to share my ideas at this point. I don't view it as a generator for clients. I just view it as an opportunity for me to, have another source of marketing out there for clients to inquire for coaching. But majority of like my clientele, it's all referral based. It's all like people that knew me within the local community. I even had some people that like I got a few clients in like Alberta, and like I don't live in Alberta, I live in Ontario, and the only reason they knew about me is because some person at their local gym was like, oh yeah, like Ian seems like a good coach, he has some good athletes, he seems like he has, he's in a good place, like you should definitely reach out. Without those connections from that person, which I very appreciate his word of mouth, I wouldn't have those clients. And then by having that little base in that area, like maybe I do such a damn good job with those clients that those clients tell their other people at their local gym that, hey, my coach has been doing this, my coach is doing this, he's a great coach, whatever. So prioritizing the service is going to be your best bet, and just slow growth is what you're going to chase. It's not sexy, it's not a funny answer, there's no ads, there's no crazy marketing. You just got to slowly build. And the other thing with content creation is I've made so many mistakes. Like I have posted stuff that I'm like, damn, that was so bad, or like this was not well received, or this didn't go the way I planned. But the biggest thing is I just view my Instagram as like a canvas of ideas. No one cares if you post something that sucks. Like everyone's scrolling and moving on. They're like, I don't really like that, I'll just move on. No one's thinking, man, Shane's content's been really bad lately. No one's thinking that. Like unless
and if it's bad,
like
nobody sees it.
Deep, yeah, if you're 500K deep, like in followers, it's like, yeah, maybe your perception will be bad, like if you post bad content. But if you're like under 20K followers, even then, I don't think anyone cares. Like you're going to market and the right people will come in, and the people that don't want to buy your services, they don't buy your services. But just make content from a place to help and like service others, and just prioritize your service. Again, a little all over the place, but if I were to start as a new coach, to summarize this for like new coaches, it's like go to local meets, be a meet director, get involved. Maybe not meet director, but like, volunteer at meets, just be of service to others and continuously educate yourself, and know that this is not going to be a short-term like gain in clients. It's going to be a very slow but steady growth. Maybe you'll pick up your first client that's really good, and I'm telling you, yeah, if you have really good clients, it absolutely helps. I'm not going to like act like it doesn't. If you have a high-profile athlete and they win a few meets, that speaks volume in terms of like people wanting to get coached by you. Does that mean they're the best coach? Not necessarily, but take what you can get, right? That's the biggest thing. So yeah, my social media strategy could be a lot more organized, but I just kind of post a value when I see it, but I also don't force posting. I think that's one of the things I started doing this year, that I'm like, if I have no good ideas, I'm not just going to force out a post because people can see right through it, in my opinion, generally speaking.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, a lot of coaches who start off I already said they over index on social media, but they overthink how big of an impact like follower count has. Like yeah, of course, like if you have like 10,000, 100,000 followers, like you have a lot more eyes in your profile, but that also depends on how good your engagement rate is too, like how many people like your posts are actually getting shown to, but then as well, like how good you're actually kind of portraying yourself as like a coach, you know, like if all you post is like topless selfies and just like real self-centered, like, you know, content, nobody's going to know that you coach. Like you might have like DM for plans in my bio or something like that, but like, or DM for coaching, but like, I don't know, I've never like saw somebody who's absolutely jacked out of their mind and like saw like a topless picture of like, I want that guy to coach me. You know?
Yeah,
like
for sure.
I think there definitely is, right? There definitely is people out there who will sign up for coaching from that, but they probably don't have great kind of reasoning behind maybe reach out for coaching. Maybe they don't understand really truly what they want. If like, you know, they're motivated to reach out for coaching just from seeing the top of this picture, I think that person is probably going to be a client that falls off very, very quickly. The people that are going to sign up for you from social media are people that you're going to be able to build a bit more of a connection with, and even that comes from like not just like, you know, you putting up a post. It's going to come from like them interacting with, like from your stories and like story replies, talking to them in like DMs. People are going to come for you for coaching because they feel like they know you. And something like myself and Ian talked about, like things like podcasts, things like YouTube. That stuff is far more impactful than like, you know, putting up a grid post. Like that stuff does help because it just kind of keeps your face popping up on somebody's timeline. But it's only a small part. Like one of the biggest things I think that helped me kind of gain like powerlifting clients and like, you know, work with some like pretty high level powerlifters in Ireland was the fact that I was involved in the community, right? As Ian said, if you make a shitty post on social media or like whatever, like nobody really knows who you are and nobody really knows like is going to just buy from you off that, but they're far more inclined to like reach out for coaching for you if you went to meet, you're volunteering, you're introducing yourself to people, they saw that you're a cool guy, you know, they start following you then and they see that you maybe post good, like have good ideas or stuff like that, or maybe even they were asking you questions at the meet, or like you were helping them out with like something on their deadlift or something on their bench, or like, you know, if you just adjust your squat rack height there a little bit more, you'd probably have an easier unrack, something like that, you know. And those things go a long way through establishing yourself in like in the community, you know. And the more often you do that, the more often you go to meets, whether that is you competing, you volunteering, like over time you'll start to develop a name, you'll start to develop a reputation. And I think it's like one thing that I don't know, like you see all the time in powerlifting, like, you know, people giving out about not enough meets being on, and then and nobody volunteers, you know, nobody wants to kind of put themselves forward to, like, you know, help this sport grow. In that sense, growing the sport is like only tinily done through social media, like, you know, if an influencer gets into it, but at the grassroots of people putting on meets, people being there to run meets, and not the same people over time, like always being at the meets and helping organise them. That's not really how things are going to grow. It's definitely not going to be how you're going to, like, you know, kind of grow as a coach if you're not being there, complaining online because, you know, you're not getting clients. You're complaining because powerlifting is, there's not enough powerlifting meets on for your clients to do, and you're not even showing up to them.
Yeah, no, and to build off that, I think this will be a good like learning lesson for people. Is whenever someone gets into coaching, I always ask them, like, think of it this way: why did you hire your coach? Like, why? So, for example, like in your case, like, why did you hire? Because you were working with RTS, right? So,
yeah.
Yeah. So, like, why'd you hire them? Like, what was your reason?
So, I wanted to learn from them. I want to learn how to be a better coach. I've done the Emergent Strategies course, and I wanted to, and I use that within my coaching. But I want to go through it myself. I want to like see if I'm being coached by one of the creators, what that process looks like, the kind of troubleshooting that's involved, because that's going to help bolster my kind of thought process when it does come to competing. Like, of course, they've produced some good lifters themselves, but that kind of part is kind of secondary, you know. Like, of course, like having some results there is important, but, you know, you don't become a huge like team of coaches in the industry and have a reputation without having achieved a good deal of success. So for me, it was really just to kind of help strengthen my coaching abilities and also get stronger as another thing.
Yeah, so like if you use that as a point, for example, you should be basing your content off that. So if you want to, obviously there's different clientele, right? So there's clientele that maybe isn't going to hire you for that way. But if you view generally why people hire coaches or who they hire, one, it's they know you. So how do people know you? Well, they know you because you're part of the community. They know you because you post on social media and you have a friendly way of portraying yourself on social media. You seem like you're not some salesman, sleazy guy. Like you're just a good person that's just putting out good content, right? And then thirdly, it's like people hire coaches for results. So obviously RTS speaks for themselves. They have so much results. So if someone's going to work with you, like if you have no results with clients, why would someone work with you? Like, and I say that and people get not upset. They're like, well, like they don't know that I know what I'm doing. It's like, well, would you hire them? It's like, they're like, no, probably not. I'm like, then don't do that. Like start with your local community, coach for free. I'd rather have a 20-person roster for free to start and just show people that you know what you're doing versus like out of the gate charging. And it's like, charging for what? Like you haven't done anything. You haven't proven yourself. So like, again, it's know, like, and trust. So liking factor. Maybe some individuals like that you post helpful content, but they also like that you have a personality and that maybe you drink a Guinness once in a while. Maybe they like that, you know? They like that you have a bit more of a laid back feel to yourself because you seem more human. But ultimately, and that you're knowledgeable. So how do you post your knowledge? Well, the easiest thing is obviously, Instagram is not necessarily the best platform for like long-term knowledge. So this podcast is great. YouTube is great. They may not get as many views as Instagram, but those views mean a lot more than a social media post. Yeah. If you have 100 viewers on your YouTube video, that's 100 people that are taking interest in your training, in your thoughts, in your processes. And you can't go unnoticed with that. Like that is very important. That's something that I think I would like to lean into in the future, and I will, because I understand that like the clients that I want to attract, I want them to be the ones that are keen and learning and really growing. And I think social media from an Instagram perspective isn't necessarily the best platform, but you can use that platform to get individuals to those longer form. So short-term content, easy tips, easy tricks. If you want to learn more about the long term, use that as a funnel system towards your long-term content and do that. And the last thing I'll say is when you post long-form content, I'm sure you can relate to this, the better you are as a coach, because the better you're able to describe your processes, the better you're able to articulate yourself, the better you're able to talk. I'm telling you right now, if I did a podcast 15 years ago, I'd be like, I don't know what to say. Like I'd be very uncomfortable. Whereas now I just don't care. Like the more I post on social media, I do a talking face on Instagram. You know how awkward that was when I first did it? I was like, hey guys, I'm on my walk right now, get my steps in. Have a good day. Like, and it's just like, what? Like, what are we doing? Right? Yeah. Whereas now I could hop on a reel, put my face on it, and I'm like, if you like it, cool. If you don't, I don't really care. Like I'm not here to please everyone. I'm here to help, here to service others. And it is funny to see that, right? Like I remember I was part of a coaching group. They're like, hey, you need to like post your face. And I was like, I don't want to post my face. Like this is awful. Like stay away from that.
You could be like the dead mouse of coaches. You just wear like, come on.
Yeah. And like you have to put your face out there for you to like attract clients. Like people want to know like what you look like. They don't want to just see a Canvas slide. And I'm not saying Canvas slides are bad. I do them all the time, but it's like just having a mix of content. I don't know if I wouldn't consider myself like a content master at all because I'm not. But like think of it like this. Like a reel is good to an extent. You know, it shows different things. A Canva post might be a bit more informational, which is cool. Like you're showing your knowledge. But then like the reel I find will show a bit more your personality potentially and a bit more of like how your demeanor is, how you talk and communicate. Are you an authority figure in the space? You know, all this type of stuff. So like when you look at getting into coaching, I think writing down why would someone hire you, that's a huge first step. Because if not, you'll just put stuff into the cloud and you'll just be yelling stuff and no one is receiving it, right? So like everyone starts at the bottom somewhere. It's just in this space it is a bit harder. So I definitely would recommend just doing them a bit more in person, like focusing on that first and seeing where that takes off. Yeah.
I think as well, like just kind of circling back to what we talked about earlier about like being the lifelong learner. I definitely do think like to coach well, there has to be some type of level of curiosity there, or some like just like in general like passion about like almost improving your own process and improving your own kind of knowledge towards that process, whether it is like training or nutrition or understanding how like motivation works and like, you know, your kind of client's psychology to a degree as best you can without studying it for like years for like a master's or something like that, right? But I do think like that's for a lot of what you'll do on the marketing side of things, like that's going to be the basis of like what you can post, right? Like you can obviously post your own experience, but when you're trying to put out like decent information, it's really important that you do actually put in some groundwork and actually like study that shit, you know. And it's a good way to keep yourself accountable, you know. It's a really good way to keep yourself accountable to study, but also a good way to keep you accountable towards or help with your consolidation of information towards posting too, right? Because like it's one thing to read something, it's one thing to like watch a lecture, but then when you're actually trying to teach it and explain it to somebody else, that's a completely different ballgame, you know. Like I've done so many like biomechanics courses across the last few years, and the first time that I looked at moment arms, fucking force angles, like even just fucking like trying to remember anatomy, like all the different ways the scapula moves and all the muscles that attach around there, I was like, fuck this. It's like they don't need to know this, and then over time you're like, actually, dude, this stuff actually comes in handy when you know it. But the more often you do it, the better you're able to like explain these concepts, and they don't sound as like complicated then when you do have a good understanding, because you can maybe kind of use analogy. It's something I do all the time with like clients. Like, you know, I wouldn't be like, you know, sitting in their check-in and be looking at their like single arm lat pull down, like, okay, well, like the thing is you need to go into a little bit of external rotation here and depress the scapula, like you know, there's like simpler ways to kind of convey those ideas. But again, that comes down to that like repetitive learning over time. And again, like you have to think about like the people who get like invited on on podcasts like this, right? Like yourself, other people of note that like people are looking towards in the industry. People are looking towards people in the industry of coaching for people who have either had some really good achievements, people who are putting out really good information and kind of are educators, or like really good coaches. But a lot of the coaches are there because they've probably had some degree of achievement themselves or helped people achieve great things from having a base of knowledge. Nowadays, it's not really going to fly if you're a coach and you're not really kind of like spending much time educating yourself. Like, it should be a part of your day that you try to keep like kind of, you know, set off as like as much as you would with training. You know, as much as you would with training, keep a tiny bit of your day, 30 minutes, just do a bit of study. You know, it could be on anything. You know, but I do think it stands to you big time. You know.
Yeah, and you want to see that growth, right? Like, I mean, I know for sure, like, if I didn't continue to learn in powerlifting or continue to grow as a coach, like, I probably would have left the career already, because, like, I don't know, like, if you're just going to do the same thing over and over and over and not grow or not learn your craft, like, what's the point? Like, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but, like, the way my personality works is, like, I'm always trying to grow, and that's one of the reasons why, like, I went through the education field, wanted to, you know, keep progressing, because it's not like I was, like, necessarily interested in the topic, but I was really interested in, like, just learning. Like, I want to learn more about whatever I'm learning, like with the deep dive in the science rabbit holes. Like, I would learn new techniques in the lab, and like that doesn't apply to coaching, but like I was just interested in like learning. I was like, ooh, this is how you like run like PCR, which is basically just like deep like wet lab work that I was doing back in the day. And like for me, it was just very interesting, because you were like, oh, this is why this process works, this is why this works. If we do this, we measure this DNA content, and you could figure out this about it. And like, you're just solving problems. And that's where coaching comes in. It's like, it's meeting the whole like education, continue to learn, continue to grow, and then actually applying that to real people to make a change in real people's lives and continue to grow. That's why, like, the moment you know, stop educating yourself, or you think you know it all, or you think you've progressed to the point, like, you've kind of lost it. And people will notice, because people will be like, wow, it just doesn't seem like he's educating himself. Feels like he's very stuck in his ways, and that's not a good way to grow a business. It's no different than technology. We had the iPod Touch, and now we have iPhone 18 or Pro Max or whatever. It's like, if they just stopped at that certain point in technology, like, Apple wouldn't be where they're at right now, right? It's continuing to evolve, and it applies with everything. Like, we have to evolve as individuals. It's the only way.
Yeah, it's kind of when like after you send the initial plan to somebody, right? So like, if maybe you're kind of falling into the very, very low standard of coaching that can be out there at the moment, where somebody comes to you, they kind of tell you their goals, and you go into ChatGPT and you're like, right, give me a nutrition plan and a training plan for this person. And you send it out to them. I'm sure stuff like that does happen, or just like something very simplistic, right? Where like you've been taught a specific method, it's worked really well for you. Maybe you don't have much experience of yourself in the gym. Like maybe you've only been training like 2 years and you've only followed one program, stuff like that, right? It is a thing because people jump into coaching really, really early on. That's a method that you understand, right? And that's a method that's worked for you. And then when you give it to somebody else, and it doesn't work for them, that's where like the education comes in. That's where it comes in to like actually like be a massive benefit, because being able to understand the principles behind your training, behind your nutrition, allows you to troubleshoot. Understanding that, okay, like 5x5, it's simply just a set and rep target, right? Like it's just a way for us to kind of manage the overall maybe intensity that we're going to be training at, the volume, okay? But it's not really that much different, like from 3x8, like if, in terms of like an actual rep scheme, and it's something that you could like periodize over time, 3x8 into 5x5 and so on, right? But that's just one example there. Now, when somebody like has an issue with yourself, for example, from a lift isn't progression, like a bench press, how else can you troubleshoot that without having a good understanding of what to look for, like what their biomechanics? Maybe it could be something to do with the program and the volume or the intensity, but like, what would your kind of diagnostic criteria be for that? If somebody's having an issue with their bench press, what would be some things that you look at to kind of give people an example of like where this like education, I guess, could come in?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's just like, first we can dive into like certain sectors. So like you said, from a programming perspective, seeing, okay, like where during the range of motion are we feeling pain? So maybe we're feeling pain at the bottom of the bench press, or maybe if it doesn't have to be pain, it could even be just like off the chest, it's just not moving well. It's like, what are ways in which we can get that lift to progress? So from, let's say, a performance base, we need to build up our pecs. So if it's slow off the chest, we got to develop more pec strength. So bodybuilding work such as like dumbbell pressing, chest flies, just different push-up exercises to be able to get off the chest strength. Also just spending more time in that range of motion, right? 2 count pause, 3 count pause, whatever maybe. Could be a technical issue where like we're noticing that maybe like when they're bringing the bar down, they're over tucking or something, and that's leading to a poor lockout. Or if they're off the chest, they're slow. Maybe they're flaring too early in the bench press. We need to learn how to just get the elbows underneath the barbell, or at least in line with the barbell, to get a more mechanically advantaged position. Or you can play around with different grips. I'm not providing the perfect solution, but essentially you're just troubleshooting and problem solving. And when you're doing these things, you need to focus on 1 to 2 things at a time. You can't just go, all right, let's change the grip, let's add in these accessories, let's add in this, and then nothing's moving, and you're like, oh my God, like I've tried everything, but like it's not working. It's like, well, no, you've tried 4 different things at once and came up with nothing. Now you have no other arsenal in your tool. And then if we shift from a programming perspective to like maybe a biomechanics perspective, let's say a little bit of pain stuff, if you're noticing that like at the bottom of your bench, it's not feeling too good, it's not feeling very stable, it's like, okay, there's different ways we can program like such things like tempo benches. We can look at how your scapula is moving. Are you getting proper scapular depression? Are you retracting too much? Are you not getting on your neck? Is your leg drive poor? If you're losing bottom position, it's possible that like your leg drive isn't consistent and you're losing chest position right off. Like you go to push, you got no leg drive, caves in, do the next rep, and then so on and so forth. So it's like understanding that like biomechanics is not the way to progress a lift, but it's an aspect of it. Programming is an aspect, and then pain science is a different aspect. Pain science, whatever categories we want to make. And then we can look at external stressors. We can look at, like, you just have to view things in all these different windows and know that they each play a role in each other. Because I know it's very common in the rehab space for, especially pain, with people like, oh, like, well, if you have bar tilt, it doesn't matter. And it's like, if there's no pain, I agree. It probably doesn't matter. But if you're experiencing pain, that could be a small component that we can fix. And worst case, if we fix that tilt and make it a bit more symmetrical, and we allow the tissues to be loaded equally across the body, then if we still have pain, then at least we have a symmetrical position, and we can then just know, we know it's probably just a programming thing completely, right? Or again, it could be a combination of things, but I think it's just not trying to be in one camp. Kind of like we said with programming, you don't want to be that person who's, I only do DUP, or I only do linear, or I only do bottom up. It's like they're all tools. Like biomechanics and movement is a tool, programming is a tool, stress management is a tool. Apply the tools for the proper thing, and that will get you ultimately where you want to get to in terms of like a plateau or an injury. Again, it's very broad, but that's just get some people thinking on some of the ideas you want to think about when you view that stuff. So take biomechanics courses because I think they're important, but don't just major in biomechanics and not major in coach communication, and don't major into pain science, and don't major into the other aspects. But also you don't want to be that coach that only knows programming, but when it comes from a technical perspective, they don't know how to cue a bench press, or they don't know how to cue a sumo deadlift, or they don't know how to cue a hinge, but they know how to program, right? Yeah. So like just be able to kind of coaches wear multiple hats. We're actually generalists in general. Like we know a little bit of pain science if you're a good coach. We know a little bit about mechanics. We know a little bit of programming. We know a little bit of athlete psychology. But we're not clinical psychologists. We're not. Some people are, but I'm not just a programmer. Like I'm more than that. I'm also not a biomechanist. I'm a little bit of everything. And if there's something that's very difficult, I just refer out. Like I'll refer to a physical therapist that I know it's outside of my scope, or I'll refer out to someone who's expert in pain science, or I'll refer out to maybe one of my friends who's just a wicked programmer and he can maybe be able to help me troubleshoot this problem or something. Just having a referral network will help a ton. So long-winded answer, but there's a lot of options, but you can't major in one aspect. You have to know it all, or at least know a lot of it.
Yeah. It's, as you said, multifaceted. The troubleshooting process. It's the case that there are many different dials that you can turn, and I guess it's when you have the knowledge behind you have an idea of which is going to be the most logical dial to turn first, versus turning them all up, or turning them all down. Like as you said there, like the likes of pain, right? Like again, I've kind of mentioned on this podcast before, I am far from a physiotherapist, but I've done enough like kind of study to and helped enough people like through like just like kind of minor issues and strains and stuff like that to have pretty decent confidence in being able to help people through those things. And like the easy thing to do, and like I guess the thing that kind of lets you off the hook as a coach is just say, we just won't do it, we'll just like take the exercise out. But like in the context of powerlifting, if like they want to powerlift, they need to be able to squat or bench or deadlift again. So it's like, okay, well, which of these dials here is like the best one for us to like turn first, right? Like obviously, like trying to adjust like looking at the program, maybe what has led to maybe them experiencing this pain. But obviously, maybe before you look at the program, look at the recovery. Like is it a case that maybe it's something that came on quickly and they're just like dehydrated or stressed or ill slept before they came into the session. Could be that, and it could be a case that the person just comes into the gym next week, they don't have any pain. Could be something that requires an actual tweak of the program. Maybe you do need to like reduce the overall intensity of a lift, the overall volume of a lift. It could be something to do with, okay, we can still keep that movement pattern in. We introduce, as you said, like a tempo, a pause, maybe cut off some of the range of motion, maybe add in some exercise here that's going to kind of bring you into a range of motion that you seem to be not as confident in or as proficient in. Ones you're showing on the likes of your Instagram stories, like the hip airplanes, where you're really trying to like bias into that kind of internally rotated position. So stuff like that. But again, having those tools in the toolkit just like kind of gives you those options to do, versus just being able to say, I don't fucking know. We'll just do less of that, which doesn't really kind of help the person. So, yeah. Look, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in today's episode, Ian. So, look, thank you very much for coming on. could you let or if you have any parting wisdom that you can grace listeners with, like, please go ahead. As well as that, just plug where people can find you.
Yeah, for sure. Parting wisdom. I'll do two parts. I'll do one for the coaches and I'll do one for the athletes. So if you're an upcoming coach and you want to get better and grow as a coach, be a lifelong learner and really be patient in the progress of your coaching. It's not going to happen overnight. It's the daily tasks every day, making sure that, you're doing your best to cover, your local basis, like I was talking about, in terms of marketing, being able to educate yourself and just be a lifelong learner and just continue to grow. And over time, and maybe in 5 to 10 years, that could be either part of your income, it could be a full-time thing. It's just one of those things you have to pace yourself for. So just like, don't rush the process, just like you wouldn't rush a training process. It's literally no different. If you want to become a great athlete, it takes 10 years, maybe 8 years, where if you want to become a great coach, it might take 15. Right? It takes a long time. And then for the athletes, find your whys, find the reasonings why you do things besides just increasing your SBD numbers. I think it's easy in the beginning to be like, well, I know why I love powerlifting because I just got to increase my SBD. But there will be a point where you will hit the brakes and you will hit hard times. I think it's important to surround yourself with good systems, good support systems, and more importantly, just ask yourself, like, why do you train? Because for me, if I didn't do SBD, and I didn't do powerlifting, I would still be in the gym regardless, because we have to view it from a health perspective as well. So just understand that the powerlifting is the hobby, but you should be in the gym no matter what, because it is literally part of your longevity. So that's my wisdom words there. Find some meaning in lifting and beyond just the numbers. And yeah, in terms of plugs, you can follow me at Ian.adaptive SP, I think something like that. You'll put it in the show notes. I can't remember the exact handle of it. And then website, I will also be linked. It's adaptivestrengthperformance.com, so you can check that out for your coaching needs, or if you want to just ask me a question on Instagram, just shoot me a DM. That's pretty much it.
Unreal. Yeah, look, thank you very much for coming on, Ian. Really, really appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll do it again at some point. If not me being in Burlington, maybe sometime in the future, or you coming over to Spain. But anyway, man, so if you did enjoy the podcast at home, make sure to leave a rating and review on the podcast platform you're listening on. Go over and follow all of Ian's stuff. Keep up with his coaching updates too, because he always seems to be producing some pretty damn good results. So yeah, I love kind of following his page and his coaching kind of journey too, because it's inspiring from my end. But anyway, we'll leave you there for this week, and thank you very much for listening.